Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. Miss Honoree, how are you doing?
Magnificent.
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 Well, we are like in chapter 10. I don't even want this to end. I'm not
Ah,
ready for this to be this
we have
close.
more books coming.
I know, there's more
It's
books.
all good.
I mean, this isn't the last chapter. We do have one more chapter after this, but we're getting close, so I'm getting a little
Yeah.
sentimental.
I do love this book because I love this topic.
I'm I'm gonna have to take a picture and post it on social media. I literally keep multiple copies of this book. Like one does not leave within arm's reach on my desk. This is the one
Wow. Why is that?
because I'm marketing my book every day.
Yeah, good, good.
Yep, I'm
I
doing what
approve this message.
I'm doing what Honorary Quarter said, right? So I have a copy of your book up here, like kind of out of camera views. I've got a whole shelf of Honorary Quarter books and all the other books, um and so I have my special copy from Honorary, a little signature in it. It's pretty.
Pretty.
Um, and then I've got the working copy, right? The one that's got like
The notes in it.
highlights and
Yeah.
I can bend the pages backwards, which I hate to say.
No, that's what books
And
are for, right?
yeah,
Like
and
you're
I
in China, you better pull that stuff out and use it.
that's right. So this is my working copy, and there's a second reason I keep it there is to remind me that every day is
That's
a book marketing day.
yeah.
So in this chapter, chapter 10, if you haven't
Yes.
seen the first few, guys, go back and watch them. This one's improvise, adapt, and overcome. And we just got done talking about like innovative marketing strategies and all the things you can do to market. But now you have to look at like analyzing how your strategy is working,
Sure.
and um, and then taking 3 points of action basically after that. So do you want to talk a little bit about what it means to analyze your marketing strategies?
Sure. So you want to, after a period of time, which we've talked about, you've got to give something a long enough time to work because there is no instant success in marketing. Although sometimes you do something and you will see an increase in sales. So if I'm part of a summit, even if that summit was recorded months earlier, I will notice an increase in sales. So that's kind of an instantaneous thing, but it's not nothing that is sustained. So your social media or your advertising, if you're doing any type of ads, if you're running a promotion, you have to run promotions to see if promotions work or if it was an anomaly. Did this promotion work, but that promotion didn't work? So once you've given something a period of time, you will want to see if over time you're seeing an increase in sales. I will experiment with this incidentally just to make sure that it's still practical with an old title. I'll
Oh,
pull out with my old titles and I'll say, okay, I'm going to run a price promotion. I'm going to run some articles about it. I'm going to do some social media posts about it. I'll put it in the PS in my newsletter, or I'll highlight it, something like that, just to see if I can re-engage, reinvigorate the algorithms. But you really want to make sure that you've given something long enough to take. And then are you noticing a trend? And you can go back in a dashboard and you can see, how did the book do in day over day? And then how is it doing week over week? It's kind of like in Stripe. I don't know if anybody uses Stripe,
right.
but I can see what my all in money has been. What's all the money that I've made from it? And then it will say, this month, this year versus this month last year, you have an increase or a decrease. A decrease really bugs me, right? I like it to be,
Why?
and then I like it to be this year so far versus last year so far. So you want to do the same thing with your books. You want to say am I selling more on this Friday versus last Friday, this week versus last week, this month versus last month, this year versus last month, last year. And when you have a new title, it's just keeping track. Just have a graph. When I released You Must Write a Book, I found this the other day. I found in my Excel spreadsheet where every single day I went in and put in how many books I sold ebook, how many books I sold paperback, what my rank was on Amazon.
This is for one book?
One book.
Gotcha. So your current
I just
launch.
got my launch at it in the moment. Every day I would log in and just was paying attention to how many
Ah,
books I had sold. day by day over day. And then I was noticing, okay, well, it was in Forbes, it was mentioned in Forbes. And so there was a spike, and then there's the halo effect. And then there's the carry-on effect. And so one of the things that I want to talk about here that I didn't really talk about in the book that I think is helpful is that you don't always know when someone is buying a book based on your activity. That's why consistency is so incredibly important. But also when you start to have a backlist. So for example, when you release course pricing strategies, people will learn about you for the very first time in that book. You may do an ad on Amazon or Facebook for that book, or you may put a post on social media for that book. And once someone reads that book, then they may go, who is this guy? Oh, I'm going to go monetize your book with a course. They may buy the course, Learn Thinkific. So while it looks straight up like you placed an ad and you got a sale and that's your return on investment, right? That's your ACOS data. What is never factored in by anyone ever, unless you do it yourself, is the fact that this guy bought this book, and then he bought that book, and then he bought that course.
Right.
So I don't know how you found me. We still don't know, right? It was divine intervention. But it was probably you saw something that I did, right? You saw something.
Yep.
And if I went back and looked at, if only everyone were you, right? If only everyone said, I'm going to buy the book, the workbook, the other book, the workbook, the other book, the workbook, the courses, and the mastermind, right? Like, my shoe collection would rival Imelda Marcos. Remember her? Right? You don't remember Imelda Marcos? Oh my gosh. Okay. Hi, I'm the oldest person on earth. I'm as old as dirt now for our previous conversation. Anyway, so when you have a first in a series, or you have a catalog of books, when you eventually have a backlist, you will see the halo effect of your advertising, of your marketing efforts over time. And so it's very easy to say, well, I've been doing this for 3 months. Amazon ads don't work. I've been doing this for 6 months, but being a guest on a podcast is a waste of time. It's an hour of my life I'm never going to get back. And I will tell you that the follow-on effect, or the halo effect of all of those things, will come together and will be worth it. If you are just looking for, I spent $1, I wanted $10 in return, you're probably not going to see that. So there is a bigger, broader analysis that is really not entirely quantifiable. But this is where, if you pay attention to what's happening over time, I know that I advertised You Must Write a Book. I'm still advertising You Must Write a Book. I'm creating other books. I'm creating other courses. I'm creating other offerings. I'm kind of going outside that particular area and expanding my brand. But I read a review of one of my books today, and the guy said, this is my second book of Honorees that I've read this week.
Oh, wow.
I have no idea. This week. He read 2 books this week. And so I don't know which 2 books they were. I know which one of the books it was. I think I was reading the reviews of the best-selling book formula, but interesting that there are 2 books that he's read. And I would guess that there would probably be more based on his enthusiasm for my writing. Did he find me because I did a price promotion, because I did an ad, because I did a podcast, because I did a social media post? I don't know. Right. But it's all working together. So when you're analyzing things, you really have to pay attention to what's happening over time, not just, am I getting a return on the dollar that I spent? Because I find that people are just focused on, I spent $100 on advertising and I didn't make $1,000, so it's not working, I quit. And I think that's a mistake over time. From someone who's been in the business for 20 years, I think it's a mistake, 1, to quit, but 2, to quit too soon and to not see where the dots are coming together.
That is impressive, because I think especially with Amazon, because I think with Amazon ads, there's so much concern over spend, but Amazon doesn't charge you until people do things.
Right. They don't charge you until people do things. And I have a series under a pen name. There are 4 books in the series, and I only ever advertise the first book.
Right.
So I can see that people who buy the first book, there's a 75% purchase right? Read through. We're going to call it a read through. It's really
Right.
a purchase through. And then of the 75%, there's probably, I think, a 37%, 37 to 40%. And then 10% on the fourth book. The fourth book is a companion of sorts.
Right.
So it's not the fourth book. It's just number 4 in that arc. But I only ever advertise the very first book. I've never advertised books 2, 3, and 4, but they're getting sales because people find the first book and they buy them. So if I looked at just the ad, is that ad profitable? I'd probably break even if we just go dollar for dollar. But if I factor in the 75, the 37, and the 10, I'm winning all day, all day long. So I'm not focused as much on spend. I want there to be a spend. I'm constantly increasing the spend because that increases and on and on and on, right? The more purchases, the more reviews, the more purchases, the more reviews, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I was happy to see that their ad campaigns are set up, their fees are set up that way, because having just done business advertising in the past on like Google and Facebook and other places, I was like, gosh, I feel like I'm just throwing hundreds of dollars into a maybe. It's like, at least with Amazon, it felt more connected to actual action, Yeah.
I think especially if you let them drive the bus.
Yes.
Some people try to like figure it out, and I think that they already have all the answers. Just give them the money.
Yeah, they're incentivized to sell your books that make a profit off of it.
They are. That's what they do. They market the books that sell. As a matter of fact, that's what those free emails are that they send out. And a lot of people try to just pay for advertising. If they had just done their launch a little more effectively, then they would have to spend less on advertising, or their advertising would work better.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah.
So, your 3 points, the first one is there an increase in sales, or am I seeing good, steady momentum? I like to just kind of focus on the word steady there, like progressive, right? Because much of what you're saying is about observing trends, not just knee jerk or in the moment type decision making. You're observing what's happening over time with the product, and then you're adjusting your strategy based on that time-based performance. And just looking at my own book sales the last couple months, I noticed as soon as I turned ads on, it took about a month for the ads to start doing something. But then after that, I was like, oh, look, my numbers every day started to go up a bit.
Yep.
And I know that those ads are about as bare bones as they could be, as far as like the things I entered into Amazon to give it some juice. So inevitably in a couple of weeks, I'll go in there and adjust some things to see if it maybe picks that back up. But you got to wait a little while to see if it actually works, right?
That's right.
Very good. I like your point also about the fact that you have to do that with things like social media, because, much like you were saying before, I've done podcast interviews or even live sessions that we've done on Thursdays, and I'll see a little spike, it'll be like, oh, look, I'll be looking at later on, like, what happened on that day? Like, how did I end up with 3 or 4 book sales that day? And then I'm like, oh, look, it was a Thursday. Oh, we were talking about that book on Thursday.
Right. That's right.
So yeah. Also, you and I are huge fans of doing podcasts, not just having a podcast or speaking on our own show, but of just going on all the shows. And I love the fact that you and I are so tightly coupled on the opinion of doing that with almost without second thought, because we've seen the benefits of doing that long term. And I'm bringing this up because of the, assessing the performance of your marketing. Yes. Frap, what's going on, Frappuccino?
Like, I need love right now. She's been hovering. She's like clawing her way up. So I figured I'd bring her up.
We just need to have like a pets episode where it's like guest pets coming on the show.
Yep. There's the tail.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about, there it is. Just the tail. See, if we don't see the cat before the tail, we're left to wonder what is actually happening.
What's happening right now? Yes.
Yeah, and I like the whole thing about like the long-term payout on podcasts, because today, even still today, I have benefit from podcasts I did years ago in a separate business line.
So good.
Still working. So
good. Yeah.
Anyway.
So I did 3 or 4 last week. I've done 2 this week.
Right.
And they're consistently on my calendar. And I'm about to be reaching out to people whose podcasts I've been on for previous books for the next one. And, it's just part of the job, right? Is just to continue to have the conversation, because, and I know that there are some people that will really put a box around their podcasts. Do you have X number of listeners, X number of downloads, those sorts of things? And I always think, you know what, I think I was Matt Ferrett's 4th podcast.
Oh,
right.
Nice.
Prepare for Medicare. Like, why would a person who's talking about writing books be on a podcast for Prepare for Medicare? Well, because I helped him write that book and that workbook.
Right.
And he's talking to a demographic of people who may want to write books.
Right.
And help a friend out. I mean, I'm up to reason 3 and
Sure.
I haven't even really thought about it. But who knows how many people who are buying a book on Medicare, which means in the US they're over 65, want to write a book. And so they go buy You Must Write a Book or something else at some point. I'm convinced that there is no too big or too small.
Right.
I wouldn't say no to Tim Ferriss if he said, why don't you come talk to me about writing a book and being on his podcast? Because he has, I don't know, every listener ever. Right. But also the person who's just starting out, who doesn't have a listenership yet. I know that the way behavior works is when someone discovers something or someone they like, they go find them everywhere. They read everything they have that makes sense. And so they will go back in time. So if they've discovered the podcast, they want to go listen to all the podcast episodes. If they discovered a person, they go find out everything about that person. If they've discovered a product, they do all the research about that product.
Right.
And so I think that the more seeds I plant, the more likelihood I have a healthy garden.
Right. Well, if I had to bet money on, you had mentioned earlier about, like, we're not sure exactly how I found you. If I had to bet money right now, this is the path that happened. I heard you on a podcast. Mm-hmm. Your podcast led me to your book. Mm-hmm. I read your book while I listened to more podcasts of you, because I was like, I just need to keep getting more of this information from this great person. And then before you know it, I'm in a course and it's, take off from there, right? Like, you should join my mastermind.
You're moving to Tennessee. I mean,
yes, exactly. We joke around about that a lot. But Tammy said yesterday to the kids, well, when Daddy gets rich, we're going to give you guys this house and then we're going to move to Tennessee.
Right. Byron found a $65 million house, like down the street from us, 5 acres. I think he was going to text it to you.
He did text it to me.
Okay. All right. Well, we were trying to figure out what the mortgage would be. Like, not that you would finance it, right? Because if you buy that, you're a billionaire. But if you did finance, what's the mortgage on a $65 million house, right?
Yeah. And for the record, no, I do not have the money to buy that house, people. If anyone's watching this.
Not today. You don't know. You don't know. The lottery was $1 billion.
Yeah, that is true.
You don't know how many courses we're going to sell from this podcast alone. Lucas.
Right here.
This one.
This one. Because
if anyone wants to help Lucas buy his house in Tennessee, we have a course that you can buy.
Yeah, we can do this one course at a time, guys.
That's right. That's right.
So that was point number 1. Is there an increase in sales? Am I seeing steady stuff? Am I seeing in the moment stuff? Right. Point number 2 is a particular tactic profitable? And in this one, you're talking about using Amazon marketing services to advertise your books. While sometimes the ad spend is profitable, it isn't always. Why do you continue? And then you go into explaining why. It's the long game. It's not a short game.
Long game. No, there is no short game in publishing, although there are success stories where people right out of the gate are selling lots of books. But generally speaking, if you look at book sales, you can think of it like compound interest. What's the old analogy? If you start with a penny and you double it every day for the first 20 days, it looks like you're watching grass grow. Oh. And then all of a sudden there's that hockey stick.
Yeah.
And so the same goes with book sales. The first thing is I sold a book today, one book. Woohoo! But what if I sold 2 books tomorrow and 4 books the next day and 8 books and on and on and on? It doesn't work like that. You're going to have ones, you'll have a couple of zeros, you'll have some ones, and then you'll move into the twos. And then you'll start to increase it. But if you have a good book that has been professionally produced, then eventually you will be in the black. And there's 2 black points, right? There's the black where all the money you invested to produce the book, you hit break even. Everything else is gravy. And then you're also then factoring in the other black, which is how much money am I putting into the book versus how much I get back. Right. I really like running price promotions for previous titles to just reinvigorate them. And so I'll throw $35 or $40 at a book promotion on a Sunday. I lower the price for a few days. I reinvigorate the sales. And then I enjoy the halo effect of not only the increased sales of the book, but then also the read through to the other books that are very similar. And if we're talking about my books for writers, now I have You Must Write a Book, You Must Market a Book, Prosperity for Writers, that whole series, the best-selling book formula, write your first nonfiction book. And then the one that's coming, we haven't started talking about yet, but there are other books. And so, and also Write Like a Boss, Publish Like a Boss, Market Like a Boss with Ben Hale. So I have a lot of books in the same arena. And if someone likes something, and I don't repeat content, I may touch on previous content, but I'm always coming at it from a different perspective, because I would never want someone to say, well, I already read this.
Right. No, every one of your books is very different from the next, even though it's Honoree. Yeah. Right.
But I don't talk about publishing like a boss. Right. In Publishing Like a Boss, we talk about publishing fiction and nonfiction. When I talk about publishing a book professionally, I touch on some of the same points, but I expand in different ways so that it's a little bit different and expanded take on the message, so that I'm always adding value to someone, even if they've read it in a different way. I think that is important.
Right.
So talking about being black, I don't even know, being in the black, I don't even know how to quantify the person who's read all of my books for writers that came in through the Miracle Morning for Writers.
Right.
Right. Which is outside of my own 60 books I've written. That's over here in a different container. But people read that book and they go, oh, she has all these other books. Let's go check all of those out. And then they might go into a different area or genre that I've written about. I do have people who have read the single mom books. Mm-hmm. They read a divorce book, then they read a single mom book, then they decided to write a book. So they've kind of meandered their way through my catalog. So how do you quantify that? How do I say the time I spent on a podcast became a book sale, became books sales, became course sales, became, right? So right. It's fun. It also is a good idea then to say, well, what else do I want to write about?
Well, I love the part that all of this is, you do 2 things here really well. One is you're actually watching the numbers, the results of your hard work, but you're not putting this emphasis on that thing produced that dollar. You're looking at it kind of like all of this works together as a system to produce all of this money that's coming into this one account, right? Which is, right. You kind of talk about that a little bit in that section. Is this particular tactic profitable? And I like the way you approached it, because when I first started reading it, I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about how an individual thing is working for me. And you do that a little bit right before that, but then you're like, well, hold on a second, before you get caught up in the number.
Yeah.
Right. Make sure that you're understanding that all of this contributes as a system.
Long game, big picture. Long game, big picture is different for dollar.
Right.
Right. The data is important. The data is just one. The data that you can see is different from the data that can accumulate over time.
That you haven't seen yet.
That I haven't seen yet, or at some point you say, I can say, the one podcast I did that brought you into my ecosystem has paid for all the advertising dollars I've ever spent ever on everything.
Just because this guy is that much of a pain.
One guy. It's just this one guy just keeps showing up.
All the babysitting fees.
Right. Right, right. But you understand what I'm saying. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes there's one thing that you do that brings such a
Right.
big return on that investment, whether it's time or money or both,
Mhm.
that everything else is gravy. Everything else is just a bonus. And so then then you have the opportunity to play around with it. And I think the one thing that people get so hung up on is being very hard on themselves. This is very serious. Data is very serious. Do we have any sales? It's very serious, right? And it's like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you wrote a book. You're awesome.
Yeah. Have
Book
fun.
marketing is fun. Have a good time with it.
What is it? Lighten up, Francis.
Right. Lighten up, Francis.
And that's, honestly, that's where the next part of the book goes, right? It's like, are we having fun yet? Like, enjoy this. It's a
Yes.
blessing to be able to you taught me something very early on about book marketing without making a point of saying this is about book marketing. You were like, hey, you're a writer, you're going to write, you love writing, you're a good marketer, you're going to enjoy talking about your book, you don't mind talking about the things that you enjoy. If you love your book, you're going to love talking about your book. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. And then she's like, you were like, I know I'm talking to the listeners like I'm and then you're like, hey, and by the way, how cool is it to get to wake up and talk about your own book every day? Like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's not just to talk about your book, you're talking about something that's helping people. So like, even better. And it's like, she's right. It kind of changed my perspective, and it took it off of like, that's a task on a spreadsheet I have to do today. Because I do have like a spreadsheet with like my posting schedule on it for the week for each book.
Because an engineer is geared toward data, and that's you.
Yeah.
Right. So this is honoring that part of yourself that says, I really like data. I'm an engineer. I like systems. I want to see things. They need to make sense to me. Right. But if you get too wound up in that, well, I spent $10 on advertising with Amazon and I only made -$4. Right. I paid 10, but I only made 6. So I lost $4. I'm out. I'm done. Forget it. I'm going to drive Uber.
It's a wash.
It's a wash. I'm over it.
Wash.
If you don't look at it from the big picture, from playing the long game, and ultimately it's like, do you want to be a full-time author or don't you? Do you want to make a living from your writing or don't you? And if you do, then you have to keep playing with it, operative word play, until you figure out what it is. And someone asked me the other day, like, how do you get new leads? How do you market? I said, I do 3 things. I'm on podcasts. I produce content. I produce continuous content, and I meet people in person. I talk to people about what I do. I talk to the right people. Right. And so it's those 3 things. I do other things. I do a little social media. I do a little advertising, but I do 3 main things, and I do them consistently. I do them all the time. I like doing them all. So I keep doing them all the time, and they work. So I've figured out the intersection of what works and what I like to do. And I do them consistently and persistently and intentionally. And that is not sexy. That's not exciting, right? Doing the same thing all the time, having a consistent writing habit, right?
Well, I think it's great.
I like it.
But it can get like in your head.
But it doesn't sound like mysterious and exciting to the person who's like, but really, how do you do it?
Well, because they think it's got to be something really special.
Right. They're looking for some kind of thing. And I've had conversations with people, but they're like, but no, really, like, where you're not telling me the information, like and I'm like, no. If you want to sell something, you got to ask for the sale. You got to talk to people and ask for the sale. Oh, you want to write a book? You got to sit down and write 150 to 250 to 2,500 words every day.
It's what you got to do.
It's good news and bad news all in the same news.
Well, and I think that, to kind of put a bend on the whole, people are expecting the magic, like some type of secret thing. It is the magic thing. Consistency is harder to achieve.
That is the magic.
Think about it. Like, that's the magic. Like, you can, how many times have you heard music and you go, oh my God, I can't believe that, like, sold that many copies of that or whatever, or that person's had that kind of career. Like, I personally, that's not my thing. So I can't understand why they've got this tremendous success. Well, you can do amazing things with consistent action and
Right.
some good fortune and some good relationships and really good hard work, and sustain that over the long run. That's the difference between like a flash in the pan one hit wonder and people who have like 30 and 40-year careers in any industry in entertainment.
Isn't it Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Right? It's the same old story. The
Yep.
tortoise and the hare, who puts in, the tortoise just keeps showing up, but wins the race over time because
Yep.
the hare wants to go over here and go over there and do that and run really fast and then take a big long siesta.
Yep.
It doesn't, life is not like that. Book marketing is not like that. And so if you recognize that your marketing strategies over time, you need to analyze them. You need to make sure that you're in the black over a period of time and you are having a good time. And if you just do that, you
Off
have a
you go.
winner.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, again, thanks for sharing chapter 10 with us, because it is amazing. There's so much there. If you haven't caught on to me saying this yet, people, and you haven't picked up the book yet, you need to go get it, because there's so much packed in like, there's just wisdom nuggets all through this thing. And your improvise, adapt, and overcome philosophy is, we'll leave that to the book. You need to go read that, because it basically tells you what to do next. Like, you've done all these things, but now you need to learn how to assess what's working and make improvements from there. And I think your last point here in the conversation about consistency is probably the most important thing you could have said today. So,
all right. It's true.
Yeah.
True. Every morning, it's the same morning.
It's Groundhog Day every day.
Groundhog Day in the morning, right?
Even Groundhog Day sounds fun if you realize you're having Groundhog Day and you have control over it.
Right. Well, the only differences are what time the sun comes up when I'm writing.
Right.
The sunrise is a little bit different time every day. When my dog gets out of bed and interrupts my writing session is a little bit different every day. But for the most part, it's the same 25 minutes, coffee and tea, break, 25 minutes, coffee and tea, workout, shower. Here I am again. And I'm not, no one tapped me on the shoulder this morning and said, Honoree, it's time to get up and lay bricks.
Right.
It's time to get up and go to your job. You don't have to get in the car and commute today. It's like same, right? So in as much as it's not, sometimes it's a little monotonous, and even I don't have the same day every day, but I have the same day every day in terms of structure.
Sure.
I don't have a commute.
Right.
I don't have a boss. I have millions of bosses.
All the bosses.
All the bosses, right? Yeah. So
excellent.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing for us to be able to do what it is that we are able to do and to help people and inspire people. So I love it.
Well, guys, this is the book. You've seen it. There's links in the show notes. Make sure you go check it out. Also, there is a companion course and workbook that go along with this. Book Marketing Mastery, if you guys are looking for that. Definitely need to check that out. There's so much in that course that takes what's in this book to the next level. And who doesn't want to spend more time listening to the amazingness that you have to share? So
check in the mail.
Thank you, Miss Honoree. We appreciate you sharing this. We've got one more chapter to go, guys. So if you've been following along with the video series, thank you so much for sticking with us. We've got one more video coming out next to cover the last chapter. And if you haven't seen the other episodes, please go back and look at the preceding episodes and get caught up, because there's amazing content here from the book and from the discussions that can really help you progress your career as an author. So, all right, Miss Honoree, well, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.